Bat approached the coffee machine, aiming to get a double portion of aromatic and strong drink. Tonight she had a night shift ahead of her, and she understood that there wouldn't be much opportunity to rest properly between calls. No full rest, a thought flashed through her mind. Josie, the spirited nurse from Morocco, with whom the pediatric emergency doctor had already experienced many challenging situations, joked about sleep. Here comes Uncle Reuben again, dissecting me on the go. Coffee no longer works, and energy drinks in bright metallic cans nonsense in terms of composition. What a day! When a child's life hung by a thread somewhere in the city, teetering on the edge of a precipice, Josie always remained calm and composed. The doctor marveled at her incredible calmness, her unwavering nerves and character, reflected Bat. This phrase is like from a cartoon or some song. And adding her own thoughts, she continued, and in her heart, there's immense kindness and love for the whole world, as if she carries an incredible gold within herself. Returning from each call, Josie and their driver, Gail, barely touched the cushions on the couches in the break room with their heads before immediately plunging into sleep. Meanwhile, the senior member of their team, Bat, remained on watch, ready to react at any moment. Bat, holding the still steaming cup in both hands, savored the moment of bliss. She inhaled the aroma, relishing it, and with satisfaction envisioned, "After the shift, I'll come back home. There's no need to cook anything special. A couple of cutlets and leftovers of yesterday's mashed potatoes in the fridge. My husband, Kai, flew out on a business trip in the morning. So the birds are free, and I'll be the chef for the next 3 days," she thought with a smile, stretching her legs out onto the coffee table. The assistant slept sweetly, immersed in the world of dreams, while the muffled hum of the split system filled the break room. This summer brought intense heat, and the air conditioner had been working non-stop for several days. "It works as if programmed, drawing strength only from its mechanical insides," pondered Bat, looking at the sleeping Gail. In his sleep, Gail peacefully snored. Everyone at the medical station knew he was in love with Josie, but for some reason he never dared to confess his feelings to her. This strong man, standing over 2 meters tall, had been through a lot, serving under contract. After being injured, he lost his wife, who couldn't accept the scarred and disfigured man with a scar across his cheek in her home. In the presence of the cheerful nurse, Gail turned into a shy lamb. He bleated while answering her questions and blushed when their skin accidentally touched, turning red with patches. Bat smiled, remembering how her own Kai, almost 20 years ago, had circled around her with interest and approached when she was cramming Latin for a medical exam in the park. "Can I sit next to you if the seat is free?" he asked, approaching. Pretty red-haired Bat, she flashed her gray-green eyes and pulled her thick textbooks closer to herself. "Why do you like me? There are so many free seats over there. I'm not in the mood to be stared at," muttered Kai, turning crimson. "Well, then my arguments are exhausted," the girl remarked cheerfully. "Shall we get acquainted? The boldest action you might dare to take." Extending her sweaty palm due to nervousness, the guy hesitantly stretched out his hand. "Kai? Or can I just be Kai?" That didn't shake his hand, instead starting to feverishly wipe away the moisture. "And I'm Bat, short and simple. Sometimes friends just call me that, the nickname stuck since childhood." The girl instantly lightened the atmosphere. With a smile on his face, Kai replied, "I would also like to earn the right to call you Bat and become your friend." "Let's switch to 2, she responded. "At our age, what's the point of all these formalities and ceremonies?" That day, Bat had to rush to the dormitory to prepare for tomorrow's boring Latin exam. She and Kai agreed that he would wait for her near the institute. If the exam was passed successfully, they would go enjoy ice cream and pastries at the pastry shop on the boulevard. A red light lit up on the emergency control panel, and the dispatcher quickly entered the call address onto the computer screen, making notes in the logbook. "The team is heading out. Address, Duval Street," announced the dispatcher. "I've already sent the information, hurry up. It's a house on the outskirts of the city. A child is struggling to breathe, and the parents can't figure out the cause of the sudden attack." With swift haste, Josie put on her medical uniform and was already descending the stairs from the second floor. Bat grabbed the medical kit, even managing to grab her folder of files. "Closer to each other, don't waste time. I have a feeling this case will be unusual," she cautioned. The ready-to-go pair of vehicles, led by Bat and her friendly trio, set off on the road. The nocturnal city gradually cooled down after a hot day. Gale even felt as if sometimes the old gazelle's wheels melted the asphalt softly beneath them, but there was no time for that. He drove carefully and swiftly. If the road remained this deserted, they would arrive in about an hour. Beth, seated in the front passenger seat beside the driver, pondered about seating Josie and Gale together for this hour. While Gale drove at top speed in the back of the car, Josie immersed herself in deep thoughts. 30 years of hardships and difficulties lay behind her. Essentially, she had been an orphan since her mother left when Josie was in the 3rd grade. Her family turned out to be among those rare cases where the father, without caring about anyone else's feelings, left them one beautiful autumn evening. And it all started when my mother left, falling in love with a young colleague, a chef, and decided to go with him to the other end of the world, Josie recalled, sighing heavily. Josie couldn't help but doubt, leaving for such a long time to another city to become a production manager at a recently opened restaurant that's the other end of the world, she thought. Her mother's fateful decision shattered Josie's father into pieces. He roamed the apartment as if unchained, searching for any trace of his wife. He marched solidly throughout the entire apartment, thoroughly checking every corner in search of any photographs or images associated with his wife. He removed any signs of her presence in the bathroom when he accidentally knocked over a bottle of perfume she had forgotten. The bottle shattered with a mournful sound on the tiled floor, and the man stood there, crushing the shards beneath his feet, as if trying to stamp out the last remnants of his love that had fallen in the bathroom. Josie had just celebrated her 10th birthday, but understanding why her mother left, leaving her with her father without saying goodbye, remained incomprehensible to her. The word love was a mystery to her. Her parents didn't display much romance or tenderness towards each other. Their relationship was rather strict and businesslike. Later, when Josie reminisced about her childhood, or rather what she managed to remember from it, she made herself a promise. She would elevate her chosen one to the heights of heaven with her sincere devotion, avoiding the mistakes her parents made. Her father concealed his sorrow in an unusual way. He didn't turn to alcohol. He fully immersed himself in work, toiled diligently. Abandoned by his wife, he, a plumbing expert, was so experienced that within a few months, a whole queue formed for him if there was a need to install an expensive bath or toilet in an upscale apartment, ensuring no defects so that none of the sophisticated clients felt disappointed. No one around suspected that behind the ordinary plumber was a person with a huge goal: to earn a fortune, go to another city to his wife, and prove to her that he was the one, the unique man who shouldn't have been abandoned. In a stylish tin box that used to store nut hava, the plumber collected bills of various denominations, not spending a penny on beer. The stack of money grew, becoming dense and heavy in his hands, pleasantly warming them with its weight. At the same time, his dream object, located in the north in an unfamiliar environment with its cold realities, was struggling with the situation. The tragedy was so mundane that the neighbors, new settlers working in the restaurant, merely shrugged when they heard that she, left without her company car in a severe snowstorm, decided to walk a couple of blocks. Josie's mother got lost in the icy grip of the snow, but after a few steps, the celestial flakes were no longer quietly descending as usual. They crashed down vaguely, coldly, like a flock of sharp, large birds of prey. Her mouth froze, her nose stuck shut, the air became inaccessible, and winter, like a lash, struck at her knees. She found herself sitting defenseless in a snowdrift, unable to scream or call for help. Hours dragged on, and when her anxious husband, noticing his wife's absence, organized a search, a lot of time had already passed. The woman they found was still alive, but upon being taken to the hospital, she succumbed swiftly. Her southern body couldn't withstand the lung infection. Thus, Josie found herself halfway deprived of her parents, but the truth about this incident became known much later. The story with Josie's father could easily have been a mysterious detective plot. After his wife's sudden disappearance, he spent a year entirely consumed by the thought of accumulating a sum of money that, as he believed, would be the decisive argument for his wife's return home. He prepared for this moment, donned his best clothes, groomed himself, but it turned out that there were no direct flights from his city to the remote place he was heading. First, he had to take a train to a major airport. The fellow passengers in the compartment seemed friendly to him. They had a cognac in their bag, an elite French one, whose name he couldn't even pronounce correctly. He himself had Ossetian pies from a local bakery, a couple of his favorite juicy lemons, and a chocolate bar. Josie's father, known for his weakness for sweets, enjoyed dinner with indescribable pleasure. Barely finishing dinner, he smoothly began to sink into a state of complete tranquility, feeling that he was losing touch with reality. Relaxing to the extent that he began aimlessly chatting with new acquaintances, even shedding treacherous tears when recalling his life. When the neighbors suggested playing a few rounds of the typical card game, Durak, he never imagined how involved he could become in the game. Josie's father had held cards in his hands perhaps a dozen times in his entire life, so when someone remarked, "Come on, you've already cost us, managed to leave yourself some money, gotta play. Lucky guy, you'll leave us all penniless here," he responded with unexpected enthusiasm. Who would refuse the chance to line their pockets with a card game? Everyone agreed to chip in some money. The sum seemed modest, yet enough to raise the stakes. Before the traveler's eyes unfolded sorrow, and the paper images of kings and queens, as if in some mystical trick, began swirling in a vortex. There was only a moment to glimpse, as new arrays of colorful portraits were repeatedly laid out on the table. Josie's father lost the first 1,000 simply for the thrill. He couldn't comprehend how that small sum had turned into 100 times more in just an hour. His head felt as heavy as iron, his eyes glued shut, and an overwhelming desire to fall asleep unexpectedly surged. The last thing Josie's father heard as he slipped into a torturous slumber was the word Lyoka, and after that, a silence engulfed everything, drowning it in darkness. Somehow, he felt he wasn't in the compartment with a comfortable bed, carefully made by the conductor, but rather swaying in a narrow metallic space along with the carriage. A sudden screech of metal, piercing cold wind, and the rare droplets of moist rain splashed on his face. Josie's father's body was discovered weeks later, lost amid dense roadside vegetation between two towns near the railroad tracks. In these parts, the appearance of even mushroom pickers and dacha dwellers was extremely rare, yet fate led a couple who loved the forest strip. They arrived on bicycles, enjoying the solitude, preparing to return home to the village. However, their attention was drawn to a red cloth in the bushes, which turned out to be a bright sports bag. Extensive efforts to establish the deceased's identity and search for relatives followed. The search became part of a lengthy process that began after the discovery of his body, which ended Josie's father's life under mysterious circumstances by the railroad tracks. It was then revealed that Josie's mother was no longer alive, and the whereabouts of the money intended to rebuild the family remained a mystery. How the man ended up by the railway tracks left under the care of a kind neighbor while her father went to another city, Josie was directed by the authorities to a children's home. There began her new life within new walls and new possibilities. The girl turned out to be sociable, unlike the other children in the institution who tended to avoid social interactions. She, on the contrary, opened up to her peers and caregivers, actively participating in studies and various activities. Energetic Josie, with chestnut hair and caramel brown eyes, stood out for her slender figure and liveliness. Her favorite subjects were biology and chemistry, and her hobbies included participating in theatrical productions and sports competitions. Among the girls, she was impossible not to notice. Josie was the best nurse on hikes and competitions. During one of the educational excursions, Josie's classmate accidentally stepped on a rusty nail, hitting an unfortunate spot, resulting in quite a serious wound, causing confusion for both the teacher and the young camp counselor. Before they reached the camp where an experienced elderly doctor named Riley was located, they had to walk even further kilometers. Blood streamed from the wound, bright crimson and relentless. For a few moments, Josie, along with the others, examined the wound. Then everyone was amazed at how the fearless girl independently constructed a tourniquet from some inexplicably acquired rope, even shouting at the bewildered crowd. Summoning all her courage, Josie took action that amazed all the witnesses. "Note down the time she tied it for Riley and quickly write a note here for me." She swiftly tore her white cotton shirt into improvised bandages. "Bring me the first aid kit alive with a team. Check what disinfectants we have. Oh, someone forgot to put a fresh batch of sterile bandages in it before the trip." Slightly later, regaining composure from shock, the sports coach was already draping his jacket over the shoulders of the girl, who remained in just a thin top. "Note down the time when I applied the tourniquet for Riley and urgently bring the note here." Josie tore her white cotton shirt into two halves, using them as improvised bandages. "Quickly fetch me the squad's first aid kit. Check for any antiseptics." Oh, it seems someone forgot to put a fresh batch of sterile bandages in the kit before our trip, she said, regaining composure slightly after the shock. A little later, having calmed down from the initial excitement, the sports coach, realizing the situation, quickly draped his jacket over the shoulders of the girl, who was left only in a thin top. With the help of two students, he fashioned makeshift stretchers from tree branches. The boy himself could hardly walk, limping and grimacing in pain. Upon arrival at the children's home, in the medical office, Riley, learning about everything after the ambulance left, said to Josie, "I've just received praise from the doctors for the first aid you so competently provided, but these are your merits, not mine. I should have been more attentive and checked the kit before the trip. It's my fault that it was poorly stocked. It's my blunder, my mistake. Where did you acquire all these professional skills, kiddo?" "Well, I don't really know," Josie laughed in response. "Firstly, I just love movies and series about medicine, and secondly, it's as if someone inside me constantly prompts, take this and do it, that's just how it is." All these factors combined in such a way that Josie didn't just choose a future profession for herself due to circumstances in the children's home, but out of deep and sincere passion. The medical van with the team struggled up a slight incline at the end of the street and stopped at the house on 10 Pechetnaya Street. Beth swiftly picked up a small suitcase and confidently headed towards the gate. Josie, pausing for a moment, was already by her side as usual, keeping an eye on her back, ensuring security. The old wooden gate prominently featured a weathered copper bell, and a thought flickered in Beth's mind. An antique thing, probably out of order for a long time. However, the bell did not disappoint. Its resonant sound echoed through the deserted street, enveloping the silence before dawn. Determined steps sounded beyond the gate, and in the next fleeting moment, the gates creaked open wide. Imagine a silent scene. Spectators might have risen, surrounding the area with boisterous, sustained applause. Before Beth, her husband Kai suddenly appeared, who had left on a business trip in the morning. His own figure materialized before her. Seeing his wife, Kai, with a stuttering voice, said, "Please come in, the girl is in the far room." Despite the inner turmoil, Beth and Josie rushed toward the house, their heads ringing with what felt like iron hammers. All other questions were set aside for later. At that moment, only the girl and her life mattered. But what did all this mean? Where did Kai suddenly come from, and what connection did he have with the little girl in the foyer? The air persistently carried the scent of dust accumulated on old towels piled up by the front door. Beth's gaze was met with an overall unkemptness that seemed to be a constant presence here. In the next room, scents of yesterday's borscht lingered, having gone through several stages of cooking with hints of cinnamon. The little patient lay on a modest couch, while a woman with a somewhat exotic appearance bustled around at a distance from her. Seeing the girl's mother before her, Beth felt a bit perplexed. Dreadlocks of tangled hair, dyed in a bright shade of acid fuchsia, heavily accentuated in black, eyes cast downward, wearing jeans with huge fashionable knee slits, topped by a shapeless t-shirt with an unusual print. Once again, a helpless thought fluttered in her head. Kai? What is he doing here? A lover of impeccable cleanliness and classic clothing style. Logically, he shouldn't be here. But he stands nearby, looking at me with the dimming eyes of a sick dog. Josie sensed the oddity of the situation and loudly commanded everyone to step back. "Let the doctor examine the girl. And you, Mom, tell us everything that happened." The girl lying on the pillow bore a striking resemblance to Kai externally, so much so that Beth's heart nearly skipped a beat. It became evident that the girl's airway was affected by angioedema. She was barely breathing, with hives visible on her face, and the little girl instinctively reached for the irritant spots, trying to scratch them. Surprisingly, Kai began answering the medic's questions. It threw Beth off balance, as if she had been plunged into icy water. He responded instantly, as if fully immersed in the situation. "Today, my daughter and I visited the circus. There was a touring performance involving young artists and ponies. Our daughter absolutely adores horses," Kai began to recount. "When the pony performance started, Aurora began coughing, and then her face began swelling before my eyes. I immediately felt it was serious. We headed straight to the circus infirmary, where they gave her some antihistamine, and the swelling instantly went down. After that, we went home." When we arrived home, everything seemed normal, but then Aurora started singing. I noticed that she had wood shavings from the circus arena in her hands. It turned out that while she was riding around one of the pony horses, she picked up a handful of chopped wooden mini blocks from the floor. All this time she had been smelling them to recall how beautiful her little horse looked. I think this triggered a strong allergic reaction, continued Kai, while Beth, listening to his story, couldn't believe her ears. We returned home, and Kai is saying all this as if, can this really be? Suddenly, rainbow circles flashed before Beth's eyes, and her gaze met Josie's. Josie instantly sensed that something was wrong with the doctor. Beth might faint here right now in this stuffy room, she thought. Of course, Josie knew her boss's husband very well, without a doubt. She realized that her colleague, the doctor, had no idea that her boss had a secret daughter. With a decisive gesture, the nurse seated Beth on a chair, brought a cotton ball soaked in ammonia to her nose, and said just a few words. Suspected anaphylactic shock. We need to get her to the hospital quickly. Time. After the injection, Aurora's face began returning to its normal color. Josie addressed the man. Don't just stand there, go outside. Tell the driver to bring you stretchers. We'll transport the girl to the hospital. We need to try avoiding intubation. We don't want to use a tracheal tube on such a little girl. Beth moved almost mechanically, as if she were a program inside a robot, until awareness returned only when they, sitting on either side of the girl, sped away in the car with Kai. Aurora's breathing remained uneven but gradually became more steady. Kai couldn't take his eyes off the child. His eyes conveyed worry and sadness. Another memory surfaced in Beth's mind. After their first date, when she successfully passed her Latin exam, their relationship developed rapidly. Within a week, they became inseparable, unable to spend even a day apart. Parents from both sides unconditionally approved of them. After completing their 4th year, they married and moved into an apartment where a cheerful grandmother, a true whirlwind, already lived. The old lady flew to her younger sister, living in the village, to engage enthusiastically in flower breeding. Now she couldn't be persuaded to return to the city. Beth and Kai enjoyed a constant harmonious union, never even considering quarreling or disputes. Such behavior was alien to their relationship. There was always complete understanding in everything. Kai, strong and fit, worked as a swimming coach at a children's sports school, while Beth successfully graduated from medical school and planned to pursue her residency. However, she couldn't decide on a specialty. She joked with herself, either an ophthalmologist dressed in a white starched robe or an ENT specialist in an office with gleaming metallic instruments. Both options look splendid. Fate made her decision. Right after defending her diploma, as if by some invisible signal from above, everything fell into place. Beth discovered she was pregnant. 9 months later, another family member was born, little Jack, their Toshka, the joy and light of their lives. Everything proceeded as it should. The happily married family had often joked, "Time to sit," and Jack confidently sat, and when it was time to walk, he quickly and skillfully took his steps. Beth temporarily set aside her medical career because all her aspirations were directed towards spending more time with her son. It seemed her intuition whispered, "Enjoy this carefree time, everything will pass quickly." Tragedy knocked on the door of their seemingly unshakable and happy family when Jack turned 3. Beth's mentor, who had always supported the young woman and praised her medical abilities, hinted that she should hurry, as in 6 months, no medical institution would want to have her within their walls. This profession favors those who dedicate themselves entirely to it and constantly strive for improvement. Upon learning she would soon become a mother, Beth dramatically altered her plans. She chose a specialization focusing on the smallest patients, newborns and infants. Her goal was to become a neonatologist. She diligently studied various pathologies encountered by the newborns just entering the world. Beth spent a lot of time in the pediatric intensive care unit, delving into the medical aspects related to infants. However, her enthusiasm for this field gradually waned. Jack consumed her thoughts and all her free time.